So, okay, we're back. Just a minute. I'm going to give you the slide. Bakit hindi ako maka-exit? Sabi ko, bakit hindi ako maka-exit? Teka. What is this? Communication process. Nandun na ba ako? The slides are with you now?
Yes, ma'am.
The slides are with you? Okay. Andyan na daw. Okay, thank you. So we are going to discuss the communication process now. So what is communication process about? So effective communication, which is timely, accurate, complete, unambiguous. Ambiguous means clear and understood by the recipient, reduces errors and results in improved patient safety. Communication can be electronic, verbal, or written. So effective communication, we must have an effective communication which is timely manner, accurate, and complete. And it is understood by the recipient. Effective communication is defined as verbal speech or other methods of relaying information in order to get a message across. If either party does not understand the purpose of the information conveyed, communication cannot be effective. Within a healthcare setting, between healthcare providers, patients, and family is critically important. So we need to have or establish an effective communication. So ineffective communication among healthcare workers is one of the leading causes of medical errors and patient harm. So then, if we are not going to communicate properly, appropriately within our healthcare providers, with our patient themselves, so it will cause a medical error and we will our patient in that case. So what are the purpose of the communication process? Number one is to improve the effectiveness of verbal and or telephone communications among caregivers. So we have to establish an effective verbal or telephone communication to report critical results of diagnostic tests, to ensure proper handover is implemented. This is the handover when you are going to go home and another healthcare provider is going to change with you to replace you. So you must provide a good handover and to prevent medical errors and protect patients from harm. In anything that we do, especially for our communication within our healthcare providers or between us, patient and us, or the family of the patients and us, we have to put it in our minds to always keep the patient safe, okay? To avoid the medical errors and to protect them from any harm. What are the most common error-prone communications? Number one is the patient care orders given verbally and those given over the telephone. Usually, especially in the home care settings, some of the nurses or the doctors themselves, they are using the telephone to communicate with the nurses or the nursing aid in the opposite side. So giving verbal orders through the telephone is one of the most common error-prone communication, because you might, or the doctors from the other side might give you correct orders, but during the time that you are writing the order, you are not going to write it properly. So write it down properly with the date at the time, and pass the message to your nurses or to your patients also. The reporting back of the critical test results, such as the clinical laboratory, telephoning the nurse, reporting the results of the critical lab value. This is one of the most common error prone. If you are receiving a telephone message, the results of those patients, critical lab results, like for example, the hemoglobin or the red blood cells report is so low than abnormal, very abnormal result. That is the critical result. So you are going to take the result and report it to your nurse or to your doctors in a proper way, in a proper manner. As long as that critical report, the test result that you have taken from the lab, you have taken from the lab, is correctly written down and passed to the nurses or to the doctor. Okay, because maybe the critical result that it was messaged to you is not the exact result that the lab has given you. So you must be careful in taking the critical test result. Write it down properly in a piece of paper, and so that you can pass it properly to your nurse or to your doctor. Inadequate handovers or transitions of care. This is what I meant when both of you are going to have the handover. One is going to have her off from duty, and the other one is going to in. So one ongoing, incoming, and one outgoing. So during the handovers, very carefully hand over everything, just like the medication, what time your medicine is next due, what time the repositioning of the patient is next due. So all of those, keep it in a handover paper, report it to the next staff to come, so that everything will be properly handed over. The language problems such as limited English proficiency,
30 minutes.
literacy, and health
Kumain ka na.
literacy of patients. This one, it causes problem also as one prone communication problem. Why? Because here in the UAE, especially here in the UAE, we have different nationality, and we have the problems like limited English proficiency. We cannot communicate properly to our patients, to our relatives, and that causes an English incompetence, or you cannot talk or you cannot communicate properly in English. Or the literacy, we don't know whether the other person or the other patients that we are taking care of, they are not educated well. So their literacy or their education is very limited. So you have to communicate with them properly. So the health literacy of the patients, whenever you are going to give them instructions, you must be sure that your instructions is properly passed over to the patient or to the relatives. Number 5 is the poor discharge planning and inadequate or unclear patient instructions. If your patients are supposed to be going for discharge, so giving them a false or the wrong instructions while going home, like taking of medications, you have to give them proper timing. Like for instance, this medicine is going to be taken 3 times a day. So instruct the patient properly during the discharge planning that this medication is to be taken after the food, or unclear patient instruction will make an error-prone communication. Cultural barriers and misunderstanding. This is what I said. Here in the UAE, we are multinational. So with our cultural backgrounds different from the other. So we have to respect what the cultural background of the other person or the other patients they might have, so that we will be having an understanding that we have to respect that their culture is different from us. So to prevent the misunderstanding, we have to respect each other. And how to improve this communication? Number one is to communicate accurately the medical orders and the test results. So number two is to improve handover communications. As what we said, we have to hand over everything to the next step to come. Discharge patients effectively. When the patients are going for discharge, you have to give a proper planning instructions to the patient according to their literacy. Overcome cultural barriers, so respect the culture that the patient has come from. Communication process. What is the communication process means? It is defined as the way we exchange messages with each other. It involves both sending and receiving messages. And we have the 5 elements. We have number one, we have the sender. To be able to transmit the message, we have the sender. So this is the person who transmits the message. And when sending message, it might be verbal. Whatever we say verbally, that is the verbal. And those non-verbal communication, messages sent without words, such as facial expression. When you are talking to your patient, he is showing you something in his or her face. So that means to say, you must know, you have to understand, you have to observe. And by the patient gesture, sorry, whether the posture of the patient, like the gesture of the patient is, he feels like he doesn't want anymore the medication or the food that you are feeding. So in this case, you will know that the patient wanted to accept any more food. So by nodding, so when the patient is nodding, yes or no, you must be observant. You must know whether the patient when to know, when to say yes, and when to say no. But be careful because of our Indian national here. So when they nod, that is two different way. They are nodding, that means to say that is no. And when they shake their hands, that means to say, when shaking heads, they are saying it yes. And when they are nodding, that means to say the opposite. The posture, when you see your patient like they are in the bed and they are trying to move, that denotes the patient wanted to move. So you must be able to recognize the posture, the gesture of your patient. The personal appearance, like for example, the patient is getting irritated. So means to say, by doing so, by checking the patient's personal appearance, you will know that the patient is already irritable. Number 2 element is message. We need the message, that is the information the sender conveys. Okay, the number 3 is receiver, the person who receives the message. We must be sure and let us ensure that receiving messages may be effective listening. The patient is listening to you effectively, reading the body language, written communication. Those are the elements of the receiving person when they are receiving the messages from you. So feedback. acknowledging the message. Whenever anybody receives a message, you have to provide them a feedback, like an acknowledgement that you received their email, that you understand what they have given to you, what message they have passed to you. Evaluation to ensure message received is understood. And the last one is the channel. Channel is a medium by which message is sent. So whenever, like by the way of you are sending it by text, or by the way you are calling through the telephone, they are the channel, they are the medium by which the message is sent. Okay, all of this in the communication process has the reference under the improved effective communication between carer and caregiver in the IPSG, or the International Patient Safety Goals, number 2, from the standard of the Joint Commission International from United States of America. So all of this communication process, we have to practice it, and we have to observe whether we are implementing and complying to what the communication process being given to us, provided by the JCI, is going to be effective when we are dealing with our patients in day-to-day basis. Okay, so we have done communication process, and there is a legal terminology that is the last one. So we still can digest the all of this lesson for today. Still can digest?
Yes po.
Okay,
Yes,
so we will continue. Thank you for that, Teresa, right?
yes,
Tisay.
ma'am.
Yes, okay. So I will just change this slide again for our last topic. So it will be our legal terminologies. Jo, anak, bakit ayaw mag-exit nito? The same way. There is nothing to stop share here. Wala naman. Ano na, i-close it should be leaving. Ito dapat ma-minimize siya. Bakit ayaw na ma-minimize? Para makuha ko yung isa. Tayo naman i-minimize natin. Ito, yung apart lang. Exit siya, di ba? Dapat exit full screen. Para makuha natin yung another slide. Di ba ganun ang ginagawa natin? Sige nga. Kunin natin yung the last one. Yung legal terminologies. Okay, then going back dito. Ito muna. Teka na. Lang ito. Okay, so enlarge this. You have the sharing. This na ba ito? Legal. Okay, tingnan natin. Bakit hindi yung maano kanina? Okay, so the slide is with you now.
Yes.
So okay, so
Yes,
this
ma'am.
is
Yes,
the
ma'am.
legal. Sige anak, tignan ko ulit. Thank you. So we have the legal terminologies now. This is the last one for our lesson for today. So we will be discussing the legal terminologies. Okay, so what are the legal terminologies? These are just few to mention. So number one of the legal terminology, we have the law. What is the law? It is defined as a code which regulates nurses' conduct or the nursing aid conduct, their actions. There are three main components with this law. So number one, is to impose a duty to conform to a specific standard. Number two, to apply to all licensed healthcare professionals. Once you have the license, this law is going to be under you. I mean, you are being regulated by this law, and it can be enforced. This law that is going to be, the law that is for the nurses or for the nursing aid are going to be enforced for you. Number two, we have the jurisprudence in the legal terminology. What is jurisprudence? Jurisprudence is the science or philosophy of the law. It can include ethical and the moral discussions, societal and political views, and the historical context of the law. If you are going to take the nursing program for the nursing education, so there is a nursing jurisprudence law. Okay, this is the law of the nurses. So it evolves, or the context of this are the laws regarding the nursing law. So whatever legalities that you will be encounter, the legalities that you will encounter all along the way of your practice, it will come up with this jurisprudence, the nursing jurisprudence. Like for example, if there is anything in the court that that there is something between you and the patients, you have done something wrong with your patient, or you have injected something, that causes the death of your patient, so you are under the nursing law and there is going to be a punishment for that. So number three is liability. Liability is an obligation that can be enforced by law. In the nursing profession, it can be further broken down into subcategories. And what are those categories? We have three. Number one is administrative liability. So when there is a violation of the regulation, there is such failing to renew your license, this will fall under the administrative liability. So just like, for example, you are working and your license is already expired and something happens during your working period, so you are liable with administrative liability. Number two is the civil liability, imposing penalties in the form of payment or compensation to the patient who was harmed. So here in the civil liability, they impose a penalty. So you have to pay what cost you, what harm caused to the patient. If it happens that you are the one who caused the harm to the patient, so you will be able to have that penalty and you are going to pay the compensation to the patient who was harmed. Number three is the criminal liability, imposing fines or imprisonment for crimes committed. This is already the high end. You know, when you have encountered or the patient was harmed during the time that you are taking care of him. So if there is anything that the patient was harmed, the patient caused death to the patient. So this is already the high end. You are going to be liable criminally. You are going to be imposed with fines or imprisonment for the crimes that you have committed. So you must be very careful in everything. When you are in the medical center working already, you have to take very careful actions in everything that you do. Number four is incompetence. It is the lacking of ability, knowledge, or qualification to complete a required task. So incompetence means the opposite. You are not competent enough to do whatever task you are supposed to do. Like for example, doing the vital signs is one of the example. Taking the vital signs, you don't know the normal and the abnormal values. So how are you going to be competent enough if you don't know how to read the normal and the abnormal reading of such temperature of the patient. How are you going to determine whether this patient is already in high fever, or the patient is going to have the convulsions or having to have the passing out? Okay, so you must be competent, you must be able, you must be knowledgeable, you must be qualified to complete every task that you are required to do. Example of this is just a nursing aide that there is no education, no experience, or no training in any medication administration, and still yet administers injection for the first time without any instruction or supervision from your direct nursing supervisor. So this situation, it will be you will be liable for this incompetence. And this situation can result in much more serious consequences for the patient. But what we are focusing on this example is the act itself. The nursing aide is performing a duty in which they lack the education, experience, training to complete. The act is incompetent. So this is a serious problem, okay? So being incompetent in anything that you do, better not to do it. If you feel like you don't know or you cannot perform it competently, or you are not so competent enough to do it, better not to do it. You ask the help of somebody else to help you to do it. You don't compromise the things that you are not competent to do for being incompetent. Number 5 is negligence. It is the omission or commission of an act which causes injury to a patient. The standard is based on what a reasonably prudent person would do in the same situation. There are 4 elements to negligence. What are these negligence, the elements to negligence? Number 1 is if you fail, there must be a known duty responsibility for you to become a negligent. So if you did not perform your responsibility, so that means to say you are neglecting your responsibility. Number 2 is the nursing aide must fail to meet this duty. So if you are not going to do your task, your responsibility, you fail to meet your duty, you did not come for work today, so you are neglecting your duty. Number 3 is there had to be a foreseeable harm. If you are seeing, or if you are thinking that your patient is going to be harmed in whatever you are doing, just like for bed making, you are doing the bed making and you are thinking that the patient is going to fall, and you are seeing that foreseeable harm. You are seeing that the patient is going to fall, but you did not prevent it. So you are neglecting that patient is going to fall. Number 4 is an injury must have occurred. If there is an injury that is supposed to occur, or that injury is going to happen, that is also being a negligent. You know that this injury to the patient is going to happen, but you were not able to prevent it. So that means to say you are being negligent, or you are neglecting your duty to prevent the patient from being injured. The last is the malpractice. One of those legal terminology that we need to know is the malpractice, is a negligence, misconduct, or breach of duty by a professional that results in injury or damage to a patient. All those licensed professionals are having a malpractice insurance. And why they are having the malpractice insurance? Because if in case you will be able to have this all negligence and incompetence while doing your duty in a medical field, so you are going to be provided with a malpractice insurance, wherein if your case will be put into the court, So there is a malpractice insurance that will cover your punishment or your penalties. So common malpractice claims arise against nurses or the nursing aide when you nurses fail to, number one, if you fail to assess and monitor. If you are with the patient and you are not going to observe the patient very well, you don't know how to assess. Your patient is already going to fall. You did not assess that patient needs a bed rail to have that barrier so that the patient will not fall, and you miss it. So the patient, you did not monitor the patient's falling, so you fail to this malpractice. Follow standards of care. If there are these standards of care that you are going to be implemented in your workplaces, you have to follow that standard of care. And by doing, if you are not going to follow it, if you fail to follow the standard of care, if there is a standard of care set and you did not follow it, so that means to say you will fail to do your standard of care. So use of equipment in a responsible manner. If you do not know how to operate or to function your equipment that's going to be used in your patient, to your patient in a responsible manner, so that means to say if you fail that, there is a malpractice claim that will arise against you. If you fail to communicate properly, if you are not going to provide your communication, the proper and good communication between your patient, your healthcare providers, or your healthcare staff, you fail to communicate. And this also will claim against you. The documentation is one of the important things. If you did not properly document accurately whatever observation you have taken, like for example, the vital signs is not accurate reading that you will report. So this one, you will fail for the documentation. Act as a patient advocate and follow the chain of command. If you did not follow, if you are not going to follow, or if you are not going to be a proper patient advocate between your patient and the relatives or the families of your patients, you are going to fail, and they are going to claim for your malpractice. And to follow the chain of command, if you are not going to follow your channel of communication, if you are not going to follow your nurse, and the nurse will not follow the doctor themselves, so you are not going to follow the chain of command. There is a channel of communication that we need to properly follow within the duty. Like for example, you have the report that you have taken from the laboratory and you need to report it directly to the doctor. It is not going to happen because you need to follow the chain of command. And the channel of communication is you are going to pass by your nurse first before going to the doctor. You don't need to go directly to the doctor themselves to report what you have taken, the critical results that you have taken. No, you have to follow the channel of communication. You must know who is the person above you or next to you. Okay, so this ends our legal terminology. So I have prepared a simple quiz for you so that you will be a little bit active, although we are going to finish it soon. Okay, so I'm going to give it to you. If you have a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper, so just prepare it, and I'm going to put it in the slide. Answer it. Put your name on top of your papers. Put your name on top of your papers and answer this properly. And once you have done it, you take the photo of it and send it to our group chat. Okay, understand?
Yes po.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Um,
So we have a short quiz in here. Okay, ready? So the slide is with you now.
Yes.
Yes po.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so ready? I'm going to give you this quiz. Okay, so just answer it. You have to choose from true or false, A and B. So we have 5 here. It's easy if you have listened well.
Question lang po sa number 2. Yung O, oxygen po ba? Kulang po ba talaga yun? Or sinadya ba talaga? Or what? Kulang talaga ng
Mistaken.
X.
Oxygen yun.
Mistaken, I think.
OX.
Yeah,
Technical error.
Human
Thank you
error.
po.
Oxygen. It is OXY. Wala namang word na O with gen. Okay, so it is a technical error. Sorry for that.
Isi-send po ba sa group, ma'am?
Yes. Lagyan nyo ng pangalan nyo yung top of that, yung doon sa inyong mga papers, just write your name. And then yung answer ninyo, take a photo and attach it with send it to our group chat.
Okay na po yan, yung 5 question.
Okay, so everybody has done with this? Finish?
No.
Yes,
Wait
ma'am.
lang, ma'am.
Everybody? Si Jinky hindi pa raw
Wait lang
tapos?
po, ma'am. Wait lang po. Wait lang po. Wait lang po.
Okay, take your time.
Ano po ba